Hello, hello. Hi there, lovely people of both LinkedIn and YouTube. Happy Monday. Time for another LinkedIn Live. So, just a quick reminder if you don't know yet, we are streaming this to LinkedIn and to YouTube. So, if you want to watch replays of this video, this interview, or some of the past interviews, you can just go to YouTube, type in Micha Fail Coach, and you'll see my channel, and there you will find that all the past interviews as well, so you don't have to scroll through my newsfeed and try to find any of the past interviews. So just a quick reminder, and while you're there, feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We are slowly growing. We are at, 120, 30 subscribers, and looking forward to grow even further. So without me going into too much random rambling, we have an amazing guest today here with us. And incidentally, his name is the same as mine, Mike. Mike, welcome to the show. Welcome to the LinkedIn Live. It's a huge pleasure to have you here. And I always ask my guests to quickly introduce themselves first before we dive into the interview.
Absolutely. Well, Micha, first of all, a real pleasure to be on your podcast show and to chat with you, because I know that we have a lot in common in terms of some of the experiences that we've been through, some of the lessons, learnings that we've been through, and also the way that we see the opportunity and how we can hopefully add value ourselves now in this stage of our careers. As you know, Micha, I've recently set up Titan Partners along with 4 other colleagues, and I think the beauty of us as a team is that we have complementary skill sets, all quite different. But in essence, we're trying to address what I think is a huge oversupply, really, of companies that are looking for some mix of coaching and consultancy, but they're underserved by the traditional blue chip consulting companies who are really targeting large corporates and multi-million-dollar contracts. So we're really seeking to help SMEs with between $10 and $100 million per annum revenue, where my perception is, I'd be interested to see if you agree, Micha, that a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of owner managers are overwhelmed. I think there's a combination of reasons why that's happening, but one of the principal drivers is technological advancement, which is making running any business as hard as it's ever been, and breaking news is getting harder every year. And really, we try and add value around 3 key areas, focusing on our collective experience, and that is know your value. A lot of entrepreneurs don't really understand the value of their business today. Grow your value, which we do largely through techniques around innovation. And we've got 2 specialists there, Dr. Dave Richards, who focuses a bit more on communication within the team, enhancing that, making sure everybody's on the same page, taking that right the way through to communication with the customer. And then Stephen Sumner, who focuses a bit more on innovation around the business model. So we use those techniques to grow your value. And then the third aspect is to realize your value, to optimize the value of a business on an exit, typically 2, 3, 4 years down the line. Some companies we're helping to get a partial exit, maybe by bringing in private equity finance in advance of an IPO, say a few years down the line. So each situation is different. It's all horses for courses, but they're really with 1 and 3 in terms of knowing your value and realizing your value. I'm bringing to bear my 15 years plus of private equity experience, where I was involved in acquiring probably over 50 companies during that period, but financing probably at least 200 transactions during that period. All mid-market companies, typically with values between 10 and 100 million on the way in. And fortunately, on the way out, those valuations were usually a lot higher. And we achieved something around 2.5 times return on money for our investors during that period. And I was involved in building a business called Gresham in London, which was a spin out from Zurich and went from being a startup to to having $1 billion assets under management when I left in 2009. So that's the summary, really, man.
Yeah, that was a lovely introduction. I mean, like every time when it's us, the veterans in the entrepreneurship, we have so much to say because we've been through so much. And if I go back to one of your first sentences, when you said, well, you've been through a lot, I've been through a lot. And isn't it true that when, we get together, more seasoned entrepreneurs who've been in entrepreneurship for a while, that's all we talk about, like, oh, do you remember when I did this stupid thing and I fucked this up, and then we did this, we did that, and that's how we solved it. But every story starts with some sort of a fuck up that happened in the beginning, because after a while you realize the benefit and the learning and the growth that happened from those fuck ups. It's really the early stage entrepreneurs who are too afraid of innovation, too afraid of testing and trying, and in the process of doing that, of course, every now and then failing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a quote by Jeff Bezos along those lines, where he says, if you're at a crossroads, the only wrong decision is staying where you are. Choose left or right. You can always change your mind later, but if you stay where you are, you're likely to be run over by an oncoming train. And I think there's a lot of common sense in that. I think we have to accept that. Steve Wallenhouse, in fact, did a great post on LinkedIn today about this very subject. That you cannot perfect every decision. And to seek perfection in every decision is almost inviting failure. Really, you just got to get on with things. And Bezos also said that these days we haven't got time to wait for all of the information that you might need to make a decision. Ultimately, slow is deadly. You've got to get off the fence and choose one of the options in front of you.
Yeah. Well, Mike, you talked a little bit about your colleagues that you are together in this venture, but I have you on the line right now, and you've been through a lot in the VC space, in mergers and acquisitions, and so on. And I know that that's a very interesting topic. I mean, I know that the title of our interview is Business Transformation in the 2020s, but mergers and acquisitions, whether fueling our growth or being somebody else's fuel, is part of the transformation. And maybe, because that's, I guess, your zone of genius, and it's a very valuable topic. So would you mind, telling us a little bit more, maybe starting with some general knowledge on that, and then I can ask a few more questions and we can go a little bit more in depth and maybe give some examples without any names, but just some examples maybe that our viewers can use
Sure.
in their transformation, in their growth, in their exits or mergers or acquisitions. So yeah, maybe a little bit of general intro.
Absolutely. Well, one thing we haven't touched on yet is that I kind of got into this really about 2 years ago because I was searching for my purpose. I actually have quite a substantial investment in a B2C fashion company, e-commerce company, which is planning to scale very rapidly through the rest of 21 and 22 and planning an IPO in London. But ultimately, I could see even 18 months ago that whilst that was a big investment for me, and I'd learned quite a lot about certainly digital and certainly digital marketing through that process, particularly B2C, it wasn't going to be something that could fulfill me longer term. And I was listening to a post on LinkedIn where somebody was quoted, it was Jonathan Cross actually, out in East Coast of the US, was quoting the fact that over 90% of brokered SME exits in North America were failing. And it occurred to me that, there must be some reasons lying behind that, but large part of it was likely to be due to poor planning and preparation. And that set me one way or another, it set me on the journey of writing a book. And the book really was designed as a playbook for owner managers on value creation, trying to distill everything that I'd learned over the last 20 years and trying to join the dots really of my journey. What had I been doing since 1992 when I got into this M&A space, and ultimately joining those dots, it appeared that I'd been involved in founding, promoting, or establishing $4 billion businesses, of which the first one was that private equity company. The second one was a credit fund that actually came within a whisker of an IPO in 2012, but didn't make it really, thanks to a rogue regulator down on the island of Guernsey, that tax haven just south of the UK. The third one was the e-commerce company, and hopefully the fourth one is Titan. And then in the course of podcasting about the book, I started spending a lot more time with Stephen Sumner and Dr. Dave Richards, and enhanced, I think, the quality of some of the insights in the book, because those guys and indeed one or two other co-collaborators have agreed to assist me and contribute chapters. So it's a collection of 4 or 5 people's thoughts and ideas now, not just my own, on the key things you need to be thinking about in terms of how you enhance the value of a private company and how you optimize a business in preparation for exit. Innovation, of course, is a big part of this, and Dr. Dave Richards founded the MIT Innovation Lab back in 1994. He actually led the team that created the internet. So there aren't too many people that know more about innovation than Dave. He's been helping companies, some substantial companies like Microsoft and Apple, and then a lot of SMEs too, to innovate over a very long period. And as I mentioned earlier, Stephen Sumner's been helping companies across a range of sectors to disrupt their business model. So innovation more around the business model. And we use these techniques coupled with things like bolt-on acquisitions, which of course is a big part of how private equity investors add value. And then some more, basic housekeeping stuff that I think a lot of companies forget to do in terms of preparation for exit. Some of that is around, have you got the right functional members of the management team? Have you got the right squad of managers in place to prepare the business for the next phase of its growth? Have you got the right people in the right slots? Have you got the right quality of people? And I think sometimes the people aspects of teams are underestimated. I think it's a critical aspect of how businesses work, and even right back in the early 2000s when we were building the Gresham private equity business, we were spending increasing amounts of time on management due diligence, because it became clear to me that a lot of the deals that went wrong didn't necessarily go wrong because of poor financial due diligence or market due diligence, but often because of poor management due diligence. We just backed the wrong people, and when we're making mistakes in that era, 2000, 2010, it was largely when we just backed the wrong person in the wrong deal.
Well, Mike, let me stop you here a little bit. I think this could be super valuable if you're okay with diving a little bit deeper into, what were some fuck ups? And again, you don't have to, mention any names or companies, but just some bad examples and maybe some good examples. And maybe what are some of those hard skills, soft skills, personality traits? What's more important? What to look for? I think this could be super, super valuable if we can just expand on this topic a little bit more.
Totally. Well, one of the things we always looked out for was whether a CEO that we're backing had real, genuine prior experience of managing people, cash, and assets, and whether he had a track record of delivering value. Because and ideally in a sector that's similar to the one that you're backing them in, because the track record usually says a lot about the individual that you're backing. Aside that more sort of factual stuff, Another classic, I think, was you need people who are good executors. And typically, the right CEOs in a management buyout have got experience of handling problems, firefighting. Interesting, given the name of your own business, and executing. Because quite often, when things went wrong, and I can think of a couple of examples there where people with big reputations were brought in from larger companies, sometimes in the same sector, to run a company that we might be acquiring in a management buy-in. And to all intents and purposes, they had the right background, the right commercial experience, but they'd been running major corporates. They hadn't been running SMEs. And so when it came to actually running a small, medium enterprise and actually executing and getting things done and leading the team, sometimes the experience that they'd had in big corporates just wasn't relevant, and just meant that they were almost inevitably going to fail in this role in a more hands-on small, medium enterprise where there's no hiding place. The CEO needs to be the guy that is the ringleader and makes things happen around him, and leads people through that process.
Just a question. I mean, a lot of what you are talking about right now could be characterized as soft skills, leadership, communication, and things like that. Now, when doing financial due diligence, not that difficult if you know how to read balance sheets and how to ask the right questions. Having a look at business model, if it's familiar industry and you have some data, you can quite easily crunch some numbers and get some very good information out of that. How were you guys doing the due diligence on the leadership team? Assessments or tests, or how would that go?
It was the early days really of management due diligence, and in fact in the 90s when I first started in private equity, Montague Private Equity, around 95, there wasn't really a formal management due diligence process in that era. It was down to the experience of colleagues to meet the team and assess them. By the time I was working at Gresham in around 2000, I think private equity industry had evolved and specialist consulting companies had emerged, companies that really only did management due diligence. And we interacted with 4 or 5 of those service providers. And over time, you start working more with some than others. I think, you gravitate towards the people that you think are adding the most value. But certainly, as time went on, we found ourselves spending more and more time in that area because we realized that that was really probably the most significant area where we needed to get our decision right. And I think back in the day, in the early 90s, mid 90s, there was probably too much emphasis on the financial and market diligence, and definitely inadequate emphasis on the management diligence in that era of private equity. Things.
Well, it was a very different time than it is now, and also leadership has changed significantly since then to what leadership is today. Well, Mike, I'm fairly sure, because I know that in my audience we have a lot of seasoned entrepreneurs, and a lot of them are either looking to make an acquisition, or I would say even more of them are looking for some sort of an exit. And what would you suggest to those entrepreneurs? What to focus on, what to work on themselves for their inner growth to be more prepared? Because once you have the exit, very rarely you can just walk away. Most of the time you get a little bit locked in, and then what are some of those things that would really serve you well once you are in that new company, or acquired by a competitor or a VC or private equity fund. So what are some of the things that our audience can start working on to be better fitted for those situations when they come?
Well, I think for owner managers going through that process of exit, coming back to your original question, it begins with that famous Clash song, should I stay or should I go? But sometimes the answer lies somewhere in the middle, where you can do an earn out and stick around for a couple of years. But for sure, an owner manager going through an exit or planning an exit needs to be pretty clear in his own mind, or his or her own mind, in advance of that exit, whether they're planning to stay, whether they're planning to go, or whether they're looking for some kind of halfway house. Because the answer to that question dictates the balance of the rest of the team and what's required around them to ensure that the right management team is in place to lead the business through the next phase. And one of the things I think it's worth focusing on at that stage of the decision making is legacy, because it's very important to us when we've been building a business over a number of years to ensure that the business is in the right hands going forward. And that also applies to choosing the right private equity partner too. And I think that's often oversimplified by some advisors who get very focused on the financial dynamics of a private equity transaction and advise their clients, might be the management team or the owner manager, to select the deal which provides the highest internal rate of return or return on their money going forward. Whereas I think there should be a lot more emphasis on the decision with choosing the right partner, because when you're going into a transaction with a financial backer, it's like entering a marriage, and you need to make sure that you're getting into bed with a financial partner that you can really work with for a long period, often 2, 3, 4, 5 years. The holding periods now for private equity deals are probably a lot longer than they used to be back in the 90s. That's one thing that's changed, because it is harder to add value now. Back in the 90s, it was a bit easier to buy cheap and make money by financial arbitrage. That's a lot harder now, partly because there are so many buyers. And one of the things we're writing about in the book is that the changing dynamics of the balance of power between private money and quoted money, because these days something like 3/4 of the finance raised on deals is private money, private equity, as opposed to quoted money. So really, private markets predominate now, whereas 20, 30 years ago when I started out, private equity was the bit part player. It was the quoted markets that really call the shots. That's changed, and you're seeing a lot of private companies stay private longer because of that access to capital that exists in private capital markets now that just wasn't there 20, 25 years ago.
Mike, how do you feel if I challenge you a little bit on the spot?
Absolutely, that's what we're here for. Yeah.
No, but I had my fair share of failed business relationships.
Yeah.
Because I just didn't do the dating part the way it's supposed to be done.
Yeah.
And I was driven by a need. They had what I needed. We jumped into the marriage, and only later, there were a lot of realizations that we were completely different as human beings. We have different values. We want different things, and suddenly, that marriage started separating.
Yeah.
I did have a few successful partnerships as well. I still have a few successful partnerships in place, and so I would put you on a spot and say, Mike, let's say that you are thinking to partner with a financial partner. So you'll be on the entrepreneurial side, because that's where our audience is. And I just want to ask you from the top of your head, what would be your process? How would you do proper due diligence, figure out if there are, common things? How would you do the dating part? What would be that process to figure out whether you are a good fit or not with a partner?
Yeah, I think it's kind of not dissimilar to any other dating process. You need to spend as much time, quality time, as you can. Ideally in different environments, because going through a transaction, you're going to spend a lot of time in legal meetings for sure. So that's going to give you an opportunity to see your potential financial partners in that environment. But why not have dinner, have drinks, play golf, whatever it is that you like to do, whether it's go fishing or whatever you like to do in your spare time. Try and spend some quality time with these guys and try and figure out what makes them tick. And obviously, you definitely want to have access to some of the people that they've backed in the past, because you want to test whether the values and qualities that you're looking for were available to these other entrepreneurs in the past.
Mike, just like our personal relationships, when everything is nice and great and we're all in that in love phase, we guys, we tend to be the best selves, which later on in the journey we might start slacking off, and having maybe a beer or two more than in the initial phase, and going out to the pub with the boys and stuff like that, which we didn't do in the first phase. So relationships, if you look at it, are really tested how strong they are and how aligned we are when times are tough.
Totally. Yeah.
How could you, and of course, when you're in that, we want to marry each other, you're the financial partner, I'm the entrepreneur, everything is fine and great. And often no problems arise by themselves. So how could you play it in a way to see, when the times will be tough, if it happens, and most often it will, everything is up and down anyway. How can we test a little bit of that if we are a good fit when the times are tough?
One way to do it is that a lot of private equity houses will spend more time with a select number of non-executive chairmen on transactions. They'll have their favorites. So it's usually quite easy to find 2 or 3 non-exec chairmen who've done maybe a handful of deals with the investor that you're trying to get to know. And obviously, if they've done a handful of deals, they'll have seen some that went well and some that didn't go so well. And so if you get access to those guys, you're probably quickly going to get a better indication of how things operated when the chips were down. Because at the end of the day, that's really what you're looking for. You're looking for a financial partner who's going to be supportive through every aspect of the process, whether things go well or not so well. You're looking for people who are going to react maturely, rationally, and so as supportively as possible, especially when things don't go according to the business plan. And I think it's something like 80% of management buyouts where the business plan isn't achieved. It's quite a high proportion. So, it's worth figuring out what happens when the chips are down.
Well, when we get closer and closer to the marriage, things tend to get a little bit overblown, often for the PR needs and so on. So yeah, then very often those goals, high goals and plans, might not be achieved the way they were planned to. Well, Mike, we just came to the 30-minute mark, because usually these interviews are around 30 minutes, and there are just a few little things that I still want to ask you. So the first one would be, if you can just recap quickly, you and your partners, what it is that you do, and who do you help the most, and what is the best way for people to reach out to you or your partners if they like, everything that you've talked about right now, and they want to reach out and have a more in-depth conversation, what's the best way?
Sure. I think LinkedIn is the easiest way. So I'm there, Mike Henebery, Henebery on LinkedIn. The good thing about my name is there aren't too many of those, so I'm pretty easy to find. And essentially, what we help entrepreneurs to do is to accelerate success, and that should show up tangibly in incremental enterprise value through an exit. And we do that by boosting revenue growth largely through innovation techniques, and a combination of financial assessment of what the value of the business is at the beginning and how best to optimize that value on an exit. So it's really balancing the private equity skills that I've got with the more hands-on consulting skills of Dr. Dave Richards and Stephen Sumner. Not
Okay.
the entrepreneurial skills of Phil Harwood and the back office skills of Dale Atkinson, who are also on the team. And so it's quite a complementary skill set we've got across the 5 individuals.
Okay, perfect. Well, I mean, my last question before we say goodbye is really, these interviews are more like a conversation, and sometimes I go in this direction, sometimes I go in that direction. You never know how. It's not scripted, so sometimes I forget to ask maybe something that you could feel would be valuable to the viewers, to the listeners of this interview. And so I call this the last golden nugget of wisdom, where I really just say, Mike, the stage is yours. And anything, any last thoughts that you want to share with the audience before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I think we're entering quite a new phase of the way that the consulting world works with the SME world particularly. And I think this digital transformation that's happening around us means people like you and I are more accessible to entrepreneurs, and certainly all the evidence seems to suggest that there's an undersupply of coaches and an excess demand of SMEs and entrepreneurs that are genuinely looking for help. And all I would say is, we're easy to find, and we're here to help. And big believer in the fact that we can get more out of life by giving, and that's the best way that we can add value. And we enjoy doing it. We enjoy helping. Collectively, we've got a lot of experience in our team, and I'm sure we can add a lot of value to many entrepreneurial situations.
Well, Mike, I'm gonna do something that I rarely do, and so I'll ask a follow-up question to this one. So, yes, on one hand, we have this digital transformation that was sped up by the Corona thing even more. But very often when I'm talking to entrepreneurs, I definitely have to say that there's more and more of them who are aware that sometimes you need a little bit of help, and that just like professional athletes who have a whole team around them, you don't have to be alone when you're an entrepreneur, and you don't have to figure everything out by yourself. And it's okay to learn from somebody else's mistakes and things like that. But I do see that there's still a huge chunk of entrepreneurs out there who think that they have to figure it out all by themselves. Do you see that as well? How do you deal with that? And what would be your suggestion, recommendation to them?
I think that's absolutely correct. And I think it's part of the challenge that people like you and I have is an education one. I think we have to demonstrate through testimonies of companies that we've helped that we can help other companies too. But I think it's essentially good to talk. And I think there's very little to lose by having a conversation with people like yourself and me, Mihai, and then I think entrepreneurs can figure out, stylistically, what kind of consultant stroke coach they're looking for. And I think it is a mix of coaching the management team and consulting the business that most SMEs require. And depending on the situation, it's horses for courses. One consultant coach might be better than another, but I think you need to talk to a few before you figure out who's best. It's a little bit like what I was saying about private equity houses and financial partners earlier. You should meet at least a handful before you decide, who you're gonna run with.
No, yeah, I absolutely agree. You have to do the due diligence before you jump in any kind of relationship. Choosing who you wanna be coached or mentored by is an important decision. It's a very intimate relationship that happens. It's like choosing a therapist or choosing your lawyer or your accountant. Like, they know everything about you. Bonds are created, friendships are created from that kind of in a deep relationship that's formed through coaching and mentoring. So it's very important for both the coach and the coachee to do their due diligence and to make sure that they really are a good fit before they start any kind of working relationship. And yeah, that takes a little bit of time. It's not like, oh, I saw an ad and now I'm being closed. I mean, especially not when serious things are in question. I mean, one thing is if you go for a few coaching hours. Another thing if this is a 1, 2, 3 year relationship, because going from where they are right now to an exit might be a 2, 3 year thing. Exactly. I mean, you need to have a very good strategy for exit in place and a plan and everything, at least a year and a half before you actually start any exit talks with anybody. You need to prepare a whole different foundation and all of that. So it is a long relationship that's formed throughout that interaction. Well, Mike,
you could write a book about it, Mia. Oh, I have.
Yeah. Well, what about your book? Where can we find your book?
Hopefully we're going to get that published by the end of the year. One of the key stories in there is the Fabify story, which is still emerging. That's the online fashion company that's scaling this year. So I want to make sure that that's covered off nicely before we launch the book. But there's something like 70,000 words in the can, so there's a bit of editing to do, but should be out by the end of the year. It's called Wrestling with Unicorns, and should be out by the end of 2021.
Well, Mike, make sure that you let me know. I want to buy it. I want to read it. And then once I do that, I want to have you back on the show and we can discuss the book and dive even deeper into that. But yeah, Mike, it was a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you for being my guest. Thank you for taking the time to share, your knowledge, your experience with the audience. And of course, I wish you all the best this week and in life and in business in general. And it was, again, really nice talking to you. So thank you for being my guest.
Thanks, Mia. Thanks for inviting me. Really enjoyed it. And see you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay. So another interview behind us. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's an interesting topic. It's not that mainstream most of the time on LinkedIn and everywhere. The whole talk is all about, marketing and sales strategies and sometimes about HR, but this is really more like a niche topic, mergers, acquisitions, exits. So I really hope you enjoyed the conversation. And, if you want to know more about that, Mike and his partners are, veterans in this business. So if you have any questions, Mike is tagged in this post on LinkedIn. But even if you're watching this on YouTube, just Google Mike and you'll find his profile, connect with him, say hi from Micha, and I'm sure he will be more than happy to have a conversation himself or maybe some of his partners, depending on the topic of the conversation. So yeah, make sure to reach out to him. Other than that, next week, another Monday, another interview. You're all very much invited to join us next Monday as well. And until then, I just hope everybody's happy, safe, healthy. There's still this craziness going on in some places all over the world. So, yeah, I hope everything's okay on your end. And I'll see you guys next Monday. Bye.